Okay, Erev Tov, good evening everyone. Shkoyach for coming. Thanks so much. And we'll start off by giving a special thank you to Rabbi Gidon and his family, Sheichu, and his entire family, and Rabbi Shimel and Rabbi Weigel for making this possible. Before we go on, so next week is going to be a bar mitzvah here in town with the Mevish Yosef Bas. And so therefore there won't be no share Sunday night, and the Sunday after that it's the official Cheder vacation, so it doesn't look like it's going to take place Sunday night. And then we'll go back and mention next time. So the last time we spoke about the Alter Rebbe, his birth, and how the Baal Shem Tov foresaw the Alter Rebbe's birth and foresaw that a neshama is coming into this world from a neshama chadasha, a new neshama, and a lot of very interesting stories that we heard about that. Mirz Hashem, this week we're going to continue with Alter Rebbe's when he was very young and his growth and so on. So before we go on, I want to just give a little bit of a picture of the Alter Rebbe's family, at least the main people in the Alter Rebbe's family. The Alter Rebbe's father was called Reb Baruch. His Rebbetzin, Reb Baruch's Rebbetzin, was called Rebbetzin Rivka. Who was she? She was the daughter of a Yid called Reb Avram the gardener. This Reb Avram the gardener lived in the area of Lozne, and when Reb Baruch got married to his daughter Rebbetzin Rivka, one of the conditions was that Rabbi Avram, the gardener, gave him a big piece of his land, a big estate, which was like farmland. And Rabbi Baruch over there had a shul, a bis medrash, and so on and so forth. Now we're going to go a little further. Rabbi Baruch, the Alter Rebbe's father, his father was called Reb Schneur Zalman. That's why the Alter Rebbe's name was basically Schneur Zalman, the regular Pirush. This Reb Schneur Zalman's Rebbetzin was called Rebbetzin Rachel, who was the daughter of Reb Baruch Batlin, another Reb Baruch, in the city of Posen. Posen was a large Jewish city at that time. Almost, well, I don't want to say similar because I'm not sure about the history facts, but a lot of times Prague and Posen and Krakow are mentioned in the same breath, sort of. So I guess they were all large Jewish cities with not only a large Jewish population, but also great Geonim and Talmidei Chachamim and so on, and Tzaddikim. So the Alter Rebbe's Baba was called Rachel, okay? That was Reb Baruch's mother, and father was called Reb Schneur Zalman. They were direct descendants of the Maharal of Prague, who comes from David HaMelech. The Geza is from David HaMelech. This Reb Schneur Zalman passed away young. Who was his father, Reb Schneur Zalman's father? He was a Yid called Reb Moshe. All their last names were Posner. Reb Moshe Posner, Reb Schneur Zalman Posner, and Reb Baruch Posner. The Alter Rebbe was the first one who was renamed, who took a name of Baruchovich. Baruchovich means that his father was Reb Baruch, so he named himself Baruchovich. However, the Alter Rebbe had brothers. One was called what's his name? Reb Yehuda Leib. The Alter Rebbe had a brother called Reb Yehuda Leib. They called him, in the early Rebbe's family, the Alter Rebbe, the Machtzedek, the Vittel Rebbe, they called him the Vetter, the uncle Maharil. Maharil stands for Moirenu Harav Reb Yehuda Leib. He also had a brother called Reb Mordechai, and they all were called Posner. And he also had a brother called Reb Moshe Posner. And that's the basic family.
The Alter Rebbe was the firstborn, and then there were...
Firstborn, correct. And the next one, I believe, was Reb Yehuda Leib. And then came Reb Mordechai and Reb Moshe. Meaning he was much older than them?
No, his mom and dad were old.
No, not necessarily, no. It was a year and something after, maybe 2 years after they got married. We spoke last time how the Baruch felt very nervous after 10 months when she wasn't having a baby. So they asked a bracha from the Baal Shem Tov, who told them they're going to have a son in 1 year from now. And then on Chai Elul, this was an Ov. And Chai Elul that year, he said, he gave them a haftocha, a promise that this exactly today, which means Chai Elul, next year, Tov Kuf Hey, you will have a son, a healthy son. So that was the Alter Rebbe.
And his
brother's Maharil?
This brother was Maharil, one of them. I think it was after the Alter Rebbe himself was born. He was the next one, Rabbi Yehuda Leib. Then it was a Mordechai, and then was a Moshe. They were all later on involved very much with helping the Alter Rebbe in Liozne. The Alter Rebbe set up a system, a yeshiva like with chadorim, with class levels or classrooms, class levels, Aleph, Beis, and Gimel, and his brothers were very involved in helping him out. They were themselves very great Talmidei Chachamim, very learned Rabbanim. Yehuda Leib, there's a sefer from him called She'eris Yehuda. The others I'm not sure. And then let's go to Alter Rebbe's sons. It's good to know even now that we're talking with Alter Rebbe's youth. The Alter Rebbe's sons, he had a few daughters, Rebbetzin Freda, Rebbetzin Dvaraleya, but the sons of the Alter Rebbe, so his first son was Reb Doiv Ber, the Mittler Rebbe, who was named after the Mezritcher Maggid. The next son was called Reb Chaim Avraham. Reb Chaim Avraham, himself a great tzaddik. And the last son was Reb Moshe, the youngest son, Reb Moshe. So we'll mention sometimes their names. It's good to know it, but I'll try to remind everyone. So now we're going to go to the Alter Rebbe and his parents, Reb Baruch and Rebbetzin Rivka. Rebbetzin Rivka, the mother of the Alter Rebbe, told over later on to the family that when the Alter Rebbe was 4 or 5 years old, his great-grandfather, the Alter Rebbe's great, they call him the grandfather, but he was the great-grandfather, who was called Reb Moshe Posner. Mamish was like a grandson or great-grandson, a little more maybe, of the Maharal, Reb Moshe. So this Reb Moshe, remember his son, Reb Schneur Zalman, passed away young. He was a teacher, he passed away very young. And that's when Reb Baruch was only bar mitzvah age, or a drop more, that he lost his father and his mother, Rebbetzin Rochel. They both passed away almost at the same time. And that's when Reb Baruch left his hometown of Vitebsk, maybe, I don't remember where it was. And he went wandering around in many places, many cities in Ukraine, Russia, Poland, and to learn how to serve the Eibishter and to find himself sort of a way of serving Hashem. And that's when Reb Baruch happened to be upon. This is a whole story in itself. He happened to meet with Tzaddikim Nistorim, and finally, after years of wandering and having a special way of how he lived his life, studying all the time, learning all the time, never asking people for handouts. That was the most distant thing from Reb Baruch. Always working for his living, and also not needing too much. He would eat very little, and he needed very little. But finally, when he got married to Rebbetzin Rivka, who was Avraham, the gardener's daughter, so this is the next stage in their life. He was already at that time a chassid and follower of the Baal Shem Tov, Reb Baruch. So their grandfather, in other words, Reb Baruch's grandfather, Alter Rebbe's father's grandfather, Reb Moshe Posner, so he was already older. Seemingly his wife maybe passed away, and in his older age he came to his grandson Reb Baruch to stay by him. Did he stay all the time or just some of the time? But he stayed a lot in Reb Baruch's villa near Liozne, which is mamish on the outskirts of Liozne. This Reb Moshe, I want you to know, was a very wealthy Yid who traveled the world. He dealt with different antique merchandise and Sforim. His main thing was Sforim. He was one of the people that was allowed, he got a special permission to go in to the Vatican, whatever you call it, the tomb over there, the Vatican, in their libraries, catacombs, whatever it's called. He was able to go and do research on Sforim. Reb Moshe. He was a tremendous Talmid Chacham, very smart person, and he used to live in Posen. That's why he was called Reb Moshe Posner. And at that time, certain in Posen, which is a large Jewish city, things started happening. Number one,
How was he able to get permission?
Because he was a wealthy businessman and he had a lot of connections. There's a whole story how he saved a Jew from converting to Christianity, God forbid, in Rome, when he visited Rome. And this Reb Moshe had to leave. He was forced to leave Posen. He was forced to leave his city, and he moved to, I believe, Vitebsk. And the reason he had to leave is seemingly the anti-Semitism and pogroms, and also the Haskalah movement, the Enlightenment, that the Reform Jews started becoming powerful in that city, and a lot of Yidden felt that this is not the place for them anymore at that time. So, but later on, Reb Moshe, when Alter Rebbe was 4 or 5 years old, Reb Moshe came to live by Reb Baruch in the villa. Reb Moshe moved all his Sforim over, or most of them, and in the Beis Medrash that Reb Baruch had on his villa, he had a special Beis Medrash, where he had people who used to come and daven all the time. And there he had a room that became like the library of Reb Moshe. He had hundreds and hundreds of Sforim in that room. So now let me tell you about what his mother, the Alter Rebbe's mother, said, that when the Alter Rebbe was 4 or 5 years old, his great-grandfather came, and he was observing his great-grandson, or the Alter Rebbe, how he's learning outside. He had a yard, he had a garden, an orchard. He's learning with his teacher, his Malamed. And Reb Moshe used to get involved. Later, when Alter Rebbe got a little older, Reb Moshe used to teach him and give him shiurim. But at this time, she said, he once asked a little boy, 4 or 5 years old, what do you like most? Outside, he was outside. And Alter Rebbe said, I like the blue sky and the clean air that people cannot pollute, he says. In other words, at that age, he already realized how the Eibishter's world works, and certain things can be polluted. You know, people not behaving perhaps correctly. And yeah. And here in the blue sky and the air cannot be polluted by humans, even though some people will talk us in that they could. In the year Tov Kuf Yud, the Alter Rebbe was born in Tov Kuf Hey, which we call Kahos, which is one of the great Eniklach of Yaakov Avinu. He was born in Tov Kuf Hey Chayel. In the year Tov Kuf Yud, he was 5 years old. He was already so into learning and remembering things that the Chevre Kadisha in the city of Liozne, it was a city, I don't know how big it was, and also out of respect for the Alter Rebbe himself, the 5-year-old, and his father, Reb Baruch, who was a Goyin. He was a Talmid of Baal Shem Tov, but he was a Goyin out there. So in honor of this family, I guess, and also they saw the greatness of the Alter Rebbe, they took him and accepted him at one of the meetings of the Chevre Kadisha. They accepted him, not yet as a full-time member. He didn't become a full chaver, but they accepted him as part of the Chevre Kadisha. And this is what's written in the Pinkos in those days of the Chevre Kadisha in Liozne. Hayoim Yoim Tezvov Kislev, that's what was written there. Hayoim Yoim Tezvov Kislev Tov Kuf Yud Lepirut Koton. Niskabel Hayelet Schneur Zalman Ben Moirenu Harav Reb Baruch LeHachevre Kadisha Sheyi Shamish. He was only chosen to be a servant of the Chevre Kadisha Ad Habar Mitzvah Shaloi. So he was 5 years old. Till his Bar Mitzvah, he will only be able to be a Shamish, a servant. And how does his membership includes that he has to pay, the 5-year-old boy, Adar Batzon, he has to pay a certain amount, which is 5 klapter. It's certain coins that they had in those days, maybe Ukrainian coins or Russian coins. And he has to donate this money every year. He has to donate it to the shul. And a certain amount, they said over there. And in Mirz Hashem, after these years, when he comes Bar Mitzvah, he will become Echad Mi'itanu. Is what the Chevre Kadisha said at 5 years old. Tov Kuf Yud. The Alter Rebbe was the Doilei Yisrael that lived around the Talmidei Chacham all saw that the Alter Rebbe is very, very special. Zikorn Mufla. Whatever he saw, he remembered. And I'll tell you something soon you'll see interesting. The Alter Rebbe, in years later, when he had his very close relation with the Tzemach Tzedek, his Einikl. Tzemach Tzedek's mother was called Veralea, the Alter Rebbe's daughter. She gave up her life for Chassidus. Literally. The Chassidim at that time, the Alter Rebbe saw a kitrug neuro, on a frightening decree against Chassidus and against the Alter Rebbe in Shamayim. Chassidim were growing and expanding, but there was a kitrug. The Tzaddik Keneged sometimes makes a kitrug. He's spreading Chassidus and he's helping out the Jews, and there's too much power on the good side. And Alter Rebbe saw the kitrug and knew that his time has come to leave the world. Rachmana litzlan. This was on Shavuos of that year. And the Alter Rebbe felt very bad about it because he said he doesn't mind to go to Gan Eden, he himself, But who's going to take care of this young tree, this Elon Koton, this Elon Tzoyer, the Hasidic movement? Because all the Chavraya Kaddish of the Mezritcher Magid always placed they voted the Alter Rebbe to become the person to organize the Hasidic movement. Because they knew he's very organized and he's very talented and very capable. So who's going to take care of it? The only one in his family that realized what's going on was his daughter Dvar Leah. Okay, I'm going off in the story just to tell you. One day we'll tell you the whole story, Mitzvah Shem. But the Dvar Leah made a bezdin. The bezdin didn't know it in advance what she wants. She made a bezdin and made them a shvua. She made them make a shvua that they'll do what she says. And what did she say? In front of an Aron Kodesh, that she's accepting the Gzar Din of her father. Tzayim Gedalia, she was fully healthy, fully, everything fully awake, fully functional. And Tzayim Gedalia, she passed away. And the only thing she asked her father, the Alter Rebbe, she gave up her life for Hasidic movement, is that the Alter Rebbe take care of her child, who was not yet 3 years old, before his upshernish, I believe. And so the Tzemach Tzedek the Alter Rebbe was very close with his little grandchild. He stayed in his room, in his house, everything. Till he got married, till he was 18 years, till he got married to Tzemach Tzedek, he was always with the Alter Rebbe. So the Alter Rebbe used to tell him stories from when he was a kid. One of the things the Alter Rebbe told him was that he had a problem when he was young. He didn't need to harave, to diligently work hard to understand Gemara and Shulchan Aruch and so on.
Bothered him.
Huh?
It bothered him.
And that bothered him. Not only that, it pained him. He says, Heder yigias hamoyach b'teiro. The Alter Rebbe said, because it was all pasuach l'fonai, it was all open for me, and everything was easy for me to understand, caused me pain that I was not zoiche to the mitzvah of yigias haTorah. He learned a lot, more than he could, but until 15 years old, he says. When he became 15 years old, when he found out, that's what it says here, when he found out why he came into this world and what his real job is, that's when it calmed him down. That's what the Alter Rebbe told the Tzemach Tzedek. Also, the Alter Rebbe, even before he found out about Chassidus, took him a while till he found out about Chassidus. And the reason was, the Baal Shem Tov warned all his followers, including Reb Baruch, and Reb Baruch had quite a few tzaddikim nestorim that stayed around his place. Some of them were wanderers that used to come to be guests by him, and some literally lived in Liozne, next to him. And all those were warned by the Baal Shem Tov, Bishum Eifen, to not tell the Alter Rebbe about the Baal Shem Tov, and Bechlal about Chassidus. He has to discover it himself. So they were able to give him ideas of Chassidus, but not tell him that this is a whole new limud and a whole new derech and avodah with Chassidus. So it took the Alter Rebbe a while. But on his own, the Alter Rebbe told the Tzemach Tzedek that he had a feeling for simple Jews when he was a young boy. He loved to be Mekarev, to be close to simple Jews, because he felt that they serve Hashem b'tmimus. They say Tehillim b'tmimus and so on and so forth. That was when he was a young boy before he found out. The Alter Rebbe, when he was a young boy, by 8 years old, he was already a baki besides all the learning in the Siddur of Shalom. The Siddur of Shalom, he knew the whole thing by heart and used to daven according to the Shalom's kavanas and minhagim and so on and so forth. Later on, we're going to learn that Alter Rebbe actually organized a group of followers, not yet as a chassid, that they all followed the ways of the derech of the Shalom. When the Alter Rebbe was 8 years old, so we're talking about his youth, 4, 5, 8 years old, he wrote to himself a pirush on the Torah, Breishis, Shmois, Vayikra, Bamidbar, and Dvarim. In his pirush was nichlal. He wrote it in a very nice way. He was very talented, and in it was included 3 pirushim that he took from Rashi, the Even Ezra, and the Ramban. But he wrote it in such a way that it was all included into that pirush, meaning that you don't need 3 different books and 3 different things. You can find it in his explanation. And he wrote it. It didn't get printed, but he wrote it. He had all these manuscripts, papers that he wrote down. When he was 10 years old, he had a frightening dream, the Alter Rebbe. In his dream, he sees himself sitting in the Beis Medrash in Liozne. I guess it was his father's shul like. And he's sitting in the Cheder Sheni. There was a second room where people used to sit and learn in the Beis Medrash. He's sitting and learning, and suddenly Rebbe Reuven Baal Shem comes into the room. Who was this Rebbe Reuven Baal Shem? He was a Yid in Liozne who used to give people medicines, what do they call it? Like these, not real medicines. Homeopathic medicines, yeah, something like that. Yeah, something like that. And he used to make segulas for people, which means you have some Kabbalistic words, you say, whatever it was. He used to give this to people, and he also used to heal animals sometimes. And he was very famous in the whole county, and they called him Rebbe Reuven Baal Shem. Anyone who was able to do such segulas, they called him Baal Shem. So this Rebbe Reuven Baal Shem lived in Liozne, and he comes into the second room with Alter Rebbe is learning. This is all in his dream. And he says to him, they're demanding you come to a court case, to Din Torah, to the Bezdin. And he says, come into the shul. This is a second room. You come into the shul in his dream. When the Alter Rebbe comes into the shul, he gives a look. He sees a Bezdin sitting by the southern table on the south side of the shul. There's sitting a Bezdin. And from a distance are standing three plaintiffs. Three Zakanim, three older Jews with beautiful shining faces. And they are all dressed in white. The people at the table, the Dayanim, the Bezdin, were all wrapped in talesim. The old people were dressed in white clothes. And as soon as the Alter Rebbe walked into the shul, the middle one of the Dayanim, there were three Dayanim, three judges, the middle one shows the Alter Rebbe to come over to the table. As soon as he got over to the table, went over to Rebbe Reuven Baal Shem, took him to the table. And as soon as he went over to the table, the three plaintiffs also came closer to the table. And that's when the Din Torah is starting. The Dayan that was sitting in the middle, the judge in the middle, turns to the Alter Rebbe and he says, these three elder Jews, tzaddikim, is Rashi, Rabbi Avram ben Ezra, and Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, the Ramban. And they are toivim you, they are calling you for a Din Torah because you want to take away their schus, their special merit, that they are mezakeh harabim. Right now, they are the ones who are giving the schus to all the Yidden to learn their sfarim. And the people Yidden are enjoying their pirushim, and they enjoy learning them. And by your pirush, which includes all three, you might take away the schus of these tzaddikim from Yidden enjoying their pirushim. The Alter Rebbe had nothing to say. What is he supposed to say? It's a good taina. I mean, they made beautiful for him, and he might take it away from them.
Because nobody knew which pirush belonged to who.
In his sefer.
Yeah, the Alter Rebbe didn't say Rashi say like this.
But maybe that was the case. I don't know.
He made like a
Possible.
Synthesis,
yeah.
So the Alter Rebbe had nothing to excuse himself, and he started crying, the Alter Rebbe, in his dream, crying strongly, and he said, I'm going to burn my sefer. So the three older people went over to the Alter Rebbe and put their hands on his head, and they benched him to be successful in his limudim, in his learning, and that he should be mechadish chidushay Torah, and a way of serving Hashem, that hundreds of thousands of Yidden in all the generations until the Goyal Tzedek, till Mashiach comes, will follow his light, his new derech and avodah. That's what they told the Alter Rebbe. He woke up from his sleep and he became very sad, the Alter Rebbe. He didn't want to burn it. In the dream, he said he's going to burn it, but it hurt him. So he made a tainus, young, 10-year-old. He started fasting. He fasted. Then he had the same dream 2 more times. After the third time, he got up, burnt his whole pirush. And that was the end of it. This was told over by the Alter Rebbe to his family and came all the way to the Frierdiker Rebbe who told it to us. Now Reb Moshe,
this was something he wrote at what age?
8. And at 10 he had the dream. He didn't have a chance to print it yet. It was all in manuscripts. Reb Moshe, the great-grandfather of the Alter Rebbe, had loads and loads of sfarim in that Beis Medrash. And Alter Rebbe wasn't yet he was around 8 or 10 years old, not sure what year, he became Baki, which means he knew verbally, he knew all by heart every name of every sefer that Reb Moshe had in the Beis Medrash. Problem is that a few years later, some of the people in Liozne, some of the Talmidei Chachamim realized that he wasn't just knowledgeable in the names of the Sforim, but he knew what every sefer, what was written in it. He had a tremendous photographic memory. And people went like amazed at the tremendous power, limitless power of the Alter Rebbe by, number one, remembering things and understanding things. He knew all the Sforim from his great-grandfather. When the Alter Rebbe was young, he studied by Malamdim, by teachers in the city of Liozne, different Malamdim. When the Alter Rebbe tells this story to the Tzemach Tzedek, I believe, when my family, that means his father, decided I should go to a place away from home to learn Torah, so my great-grandfather, Reb Moshe, was happy on one end, in one side, and sad on the other. He was happy that I'm going to learn Torah in a different place, which is something that was very popular even today. You travel somewhere to learn Torah. On the other hand, he felt very bad that I'm leaving home. But in the end, he comforted himself, my great-grandfather, that I'm going to a place of Torah. His father, the Alter Rebbe's father, Reb Baruch, decided to send him, guess where? To the city of Lubavitch, which was not known yet as a special city. It was a city called Lubavitch, and Yidden lived there. There was a yeshiva there. There was, a nice Jewish community. But in that city, at that time, lived a Talmid of the Baal Shem Tov, whose name was Rabbi Sochar Doiv Kabilniker. Came from a city called Kabilnik. And Reb Baruch, the Alter Rebbe's father, he was still very young, 9, 10 years old. The Alter Rebbe's father sent him to Lubavitch, took him to Lubavitch. Over there was also a preacher called Rabbi Yosef. Mitzvah Hashem, I hope by next time I'll have a little more information because I always get confused. First of all, there was a Rabbi Yosef Yitzchok who got married to the Alter Rebbe's aunt, Reb Baruch's sister. She's part of the Alter Rebbe's family. He lived in Vitebsk. He was called Rabbi Yosef Yitzchok. He was a genius. And he lived in Vitebsk and married to Dvar Leah, who's the Alter Rebbe's aunt, Reb Baruch's sister. And the Alter Rebbe learned by him also later on. He went to Vitebsk. But now there was a certain Jew called Rabbi Yosef who was in Lubavitch. He was a preacher. And Rabbi Sochar Doiv Kabilniker used to teach, used to give a shir, Gemara, whatever it was. So the Alter Rebbe went to him to learn Gemara, to become his student. 2 years the Alter Rebbe stayed in Lubavitch, and he used to sit and learn all the time, very diligently. The people in Lubavitch called him the Ilui of Liozne, the genius of Liozne. And everyone respected him, and everyone spoke about him. Jewish mothers would bless themselves, halavai, my child, or at least my son-in-law, should be like this young boy, 11 years old, 10 years old, like this boy from Liozne, this genius from Liozne. And everyone knew that he's constantly learning Torah and everything else. The Alter Rebbe said later on to his family, to his grandson, Avas Yisrael, having respect for every kind of Jew, he says, I learned in Lubavitch. Over there, I saw the preacher, Rabbi Yosef, who obviously was also a chassid of the Baal Shem Tov follower. I saw his respect to Rabbi Yitzchak, the shoemaker, Reb Shlomo, the tailor, and Reb Avram, the smith. They were Amei Ha'aretz, they were ignoramuses, those Jews. Didn't even understand the taich of davening or learning. But they feared Hashem with their whole heart. And Reb Yosef, the preacher, who was himself a learned person, a goyin, a genius, he respected him. And this is what the Alter Rebbe describes when he was a young boy, 10, 11 years old in Lubavitch. These 3 Jews, Reb Yitzchok, the shoemaker, and Reb Shlomo and Reb Avram, were from the group. They used to have groups in every city, almost in every community. One was called Mashkimei Kum, those who rise early. They served Hashem by rising early. And another group was called Ma'achri Sheves. They stay up late. So in every Beis Medrash, in every shul in the olden days, you had people almost 24 hours a day learning. Because the Ma'achri Sheves would stay until midnight to do Tikkun Chatzos. And at that time, the people from the Mashkim Yakum used to arrive already to do Tikkun Chatzos also. And they used to stay there. So these three Jews, he gives them, for instance, the Alter Rebbe, they used to come every single morning, whether it was a weekday, whether it was Shabbos, whether it was Yom Tov, whether it was winter, whether it was summer, 2 o'clock in the morning, they used to come to shul already to start saying Tehillim. And they used to say Tehillim for hours, the whole entire Tehillim, every day of the year, says the Alter Rebbe. And how impressive and how beautiful, says the Alter Rebbe, it was to see, the sight to behold. How the old genius, the preacher, Rabbi Yosef, used to finish his learning after Tikkun Chatzos. He used to learn Gemara. Finish it very quickly in order to participate with these simple Jews saying Tehillim together with them. That's what Alter Rebbe saw, respect for simple Jews and Avas Yisrael for simple Jews. Many times, says the Alter Rebbe, I heard this genius, Rabbi Yosef, the preacher, saying to Rabbi Sachadev Kabilnike, who I believe they were related. So either Rabbi Sachadev was his son-in-law, or he was Rabbi Sachadev's son, I don't know for sure. Rabbi Sachadev was his son-in-law. So who was this Rabbi Yosef the Maggid? It was not Rabbi Yosef the Maggid.
He was the Rav.
The Rav of Lubavitch.
And then he disappeared for a while. He used to go away from time to time.
Was he a follower of the Baal Shem Tov?
That's when he disappeared. That's when he found the
That was Sachadev also did that. He's going to say that soon. Sachadev used to go for Golus, but really he used to go to the Baal Shem Tov.
So, no. The Baal told Yosef to take his Sachadev from the Shia over there where he was...
So that's in Sefer Zechronus?
No.
No, somewhere else. Okay. We'll check that out and mention for next time. So he says... Okay, we'll check it out. Many times, says the Alter Rebbe, I heard this genius of Yosef, the preacher, saying, the Maggid, Mechiach he was called, saying to his son-in-law, the genius of Yisachadev Kabilnike, who was the Alter Rebbe's Rebbe. He said to him, the kapitlach, the chapters of Tehillim, that Rabbi Avram the smith and Rabbi Yitzchak the shoemaker say during the day, not only in the morning, but while he's working on his carpentry or on the smithery or whatever it's called, while he's banging away with the hammer, those chapters of Tehillim, said Rabbi Yosef, are more beloved by Hashem than our Chidushei Torah. And these were people who really had Chidushei Torah, really learned, they were Talmidei Chachamim. And yet he said their Tehillim is more important, more beloved than Eibishter. So this is what the Alter Rebbe picked up when he was very young. He didn't know yet about Chassidus. He didn't know yet about the Baal Shem Tov. The Alter Rebbe learned by Rabbi Sachadev until he was 11 years old. And the Frierdiker Rebbe says, Rabbi Sachadev told the Alter Rebbe he's going to go into exile. He did it a few times, and he really went to the Baal Shem Tov. He did not want to tell the Alter Rebbe where he's going. Because he did not want to tell the Alter Rebbe he's going to the Baal Shem Tov, because the Baal Shem Tov had warned him not to tell the Alter Rebbe. It is, the Frierdiker Rebbe says in Asicha, that years later, when the Alter Rebbe was an adult already, in years, so he was upset with Rabbi Sachadev Kabilnike. He had a kpeda on him. Why didn't you take me to the Baal Shem Tov? Even though he knew that he wasn't allowed to, but he was still upset with him. There's a few things that we'll see later. So the Alter Rebbe learned by him till he was 11, and at that time Rabbi Sachadev Kabilnike told the Alter Rebbe, I'm going out to exile. For months or years, whatever it was. He took the Alter Rebbe with him to return him to his father's villa in Liozne. When he came back, he told Reb Baruch, the Alter Rebbe's father, your son cannot get help by teachers anymore. He's on his own. He's outdone the teachers, he said. And then the Alter Rebbe just came back. He made himself a seder, a schedule, how to learn. He learned Nigla, he learned Kabbalah, and for 2 years he sat in this small base medrash next to his father's villa, or mansion, whatever it's called, and he sat and learned for 2 years. He says, my great-grandfather enjoyed very much when I came back. So much so, his grandfather, Moshe, would fast every week, Monday, Thursday, and Friday. But when the Alter Rebbe came back, he was in the middle of a fast. He learned out from Shulchan Aruch and Gemara. He made a whole pilpul to find a heter, to find a permission of something like a neder that he's always fasting, in order to show honor to a Talmid Chacham. He considered his little great-grandson, who was only 11 years old, as a tremendous Talmid Chacham. So I guess he didn't fast that day. He became very happy when he came back, and he tested me in learning, says the Alter Rebbe, and he gave me also a schedule on how to learn, and I kept it very carefully. And the Alter Rebbe, by the way, said to Tzemach Tzedek that at that time he already started figuring out certain things that he later on instituted in Chassidus Chabad. He figured out the idea of two neshamas. He figured out the idea of using a seichel in order to serve the Eibishter, not just your heart, and so on and so forth. In Lubavitch, when I was by Rabbi Socha Doiv of Kabilnik, says the Alter Rebbe, I found out that there are great tzaddikim, geoinim, Talmidei Chachamim, geniuses, who are hidden, and they go into exile, or they live in certain places and they look like regular workers, shoemakers, and so on and so forth, and they're mamish geniuses that know Shas and Bavli and Yerushalmi inside and out. And they're all tzaddikim nestorim, hidden tzaddikim. That's what he found out in Lubavitch. Time went by, and I was in Liozne already, back after I finished learning in Lubavitch. And I was sitting in the forest, and I was deeply involved in thinking about some deep idea in Kabbalah, in the mystics. And suddenly I hear somebody learning with a sweet, strong voice. I followed the sound, and I saw Reb Zundel Arein, one of the locals around Reb Baruch's villa, around Reb Baruch's estate and farm. He's sitting on a little boulder, stone-like, under a tree, and he's sitting and learning with such happiness, and his face is shining. I knew right away this Reb Zundel Arein is one of the hidden tzaddikim. I wanted very much to get friendly with him and find out all about him. But then I made a decision, says the Alter Rebbe. He's 11, 12 years old. I made a decision. I don't want to stop him from his way he's serving Hashem and show him that I know he's a tzaddik nister. But it did have a tremendous effect on my behavior, says the Alter Rebbe. I enjoyed very much my great-grandfather's way of learning. I honored him. I respected him. I was very satisfied to hear his lessons in Gemara with his genius explanations, very organized explanations, says the Alter Rebbe. But one thing I couldn't handle, my great-grandfather. His Yiras Shamayim that was so dry and so cold, he says. Moshe was not with the Chassidim. He wasn't a misnagid, but he definitely did not agree with this whole idea of the Chassidim, Moshe. So that's what we read in the stories. So his dry and cold Yiras Shamayim and his satisfaction with his own behavior, I couldn't handle that, says the Alter Rebbe. Alter Rebbe was the type that likes humbleness and so on. From time to time, I got to realize and recognize wanderers that came by our house. And I had a keen eye, says the Alter Rebbe, to figure out who was a hidden tzaddik. And those that were hidden tzaddikim, I tried to be close to them and listen to them. One day, Rabbi Avram Leib, the pot maker, some of these people had huts, like little factories where they did their work in the field or next to the field of Reb Baruch. They didn't have factories, they produced their own pots and sold it in town. Or this guy, another guy was a carpenter and so on. So I was sitting and learning, and suddenly Rabbi Avram, I was sitting and learning in Beis Medrash, it seems like, and suddenly Rabbi Avram Leib, the pot maker, comes over to me. He heard me learning, and he explains me the whole section in the Gemara the way he learns it. I was so happy and impressed with the way he explained it to me, and I couldn't hold myself in. I asked Rabbi Avram Leib, tell me, why do you act like an ignoramus, like an Amoritz? Why do you hide yourself? And then he answered me, when you'll grow up, you'll understand. He told the Alter Rebbe. And then he told him about another Yid over there who also did some very simple work, looked like an ignorant person. That guy, he says, he knows Bavli, Yerushalmi, that means the whole entire Shas, the whole entire Talmud. He knows the whole Rambam. He knows the whole Shulchan Aruch, Baal Peh, by heart. Everything by heart. And he has a tremendous perception, and also he has tremendous memory. He remembers everything. And then he told him about Reb Zundel Arein, the one who he didn't want to bother, that he's also tzaddik nister, hidden. The reason why they even told me these things, says the Alter Rebbe, I don't know. But their revelation to me, in other words, they talking to me even and befriending me, caused me to get closer to serving Hashem and caused me a tremendous, tremendous benefits in my life. When the Alter Rebbe was 11 years old, he started doing stuff for the community. He started getting involved for the public, for the Jewish people. Reb Moshe, the son of the Alter Rebbe, I told the Alter Rebbe had a son called Reb Moshe, was probably named after his great-grandfather, and also his brother was named after his great-grandfather. So Reb Moshe told over this story. He says, in his memories, Reb Moshe's memories, I met an old Jew called Reb Moshe Ivansker, who was in Liozne in the times that Alter Rebbe was a young boy, 11 years old. And Reb Moshe Ivansker said he was himself at a market date or a fair in Liozne when everybody comes together, hundreds of people, to go shopping and so on and so forth. And suddenly he sees the genius of Liozne, who everyone knew who he was, an 11-year-old, standing up on a wagon attached to horses, and starts making announcements to all the Yidden that are there. It's like a Mefzoim type of thing. He's making a speech. And he says to the Yidden, I want to give a suggestion, a good friendly suggestion, that Yidden should stop doing the regular business, buying and selling, and get involved with work. Farming, orchards, fields, planting, and work, like carpentry and so on, not to do business. The Alter Rebbe saw in his wisdom that for the Yidden, a lot of Yidden were very impoverished. Business only brought them a little bit, and it brought anti-Semitism a lot of times. People saying, oh, the Jewish people are ripping off everybody. So that's what the Alter Rebbe said. At that time, says Reb Moshe, the Alter Rebbe's son, he wasn't around yet at that time, but he says at that time, many refugees came running to the area, to the county area of Liozne. Refugees from Posen, refugees from Prague. I looked around a little bit in the history. There were a lot of expulsions going on, and like I said, pogroms. Jews had to run, unfortunately. And they came running to the area of Liozne. And the Alter Rebbe himself organized many of those families of refugees should get to work in the fields, farming, orchards, and so on, gardening. And Alter Rebbe literally got his father, Reb Baruch, involved to give up parts of his land for these people to have what to work with. The Alter Rebbe he was born in Liozne, outside of Liozne, in a village, and loved the fields. And he was from the first people amongst the Jewish nation at that time to tell Yidden, please go and work in the fields, don't do business. And like I said, a lot of these people settled near Reb Baruch's villa, near a famous place called the White Spring. Russia, Ukraine, Poland. It kept on going back and forth to three countries.
In 56 was a 7-year war.
Yeah.
Between France, Austria, and Russia, and Russia.
Oh, you mean the Platin? You're talking about the Platin, the refugees.
Yeah.
Whatever the case was,
Maybe, I'm not just... We'll get
so there was a white spring, a little spring with a stream coming out from under the ground, fresh water. Now this stream is, till today you could see it, it's still a very tiny stream. There are people who went to do research after Glasnost, after the communist regime fell. So there's pictures actually of it. They went and they found it, so on and so forth. The white stream in Russian, they call it Biela. Biela means white, Ruche, whatever that means. And it's right next to the city of Liozne. The Alter Rebbe kept on encouraging the Yidden to do work. And now we're going to talk about what was this white spring. This white spring was suddenly started pouring out fresh water after an incident that happened in Liozne. There was a sorcerer, a Goyish sorcerer, used to do black magic, a machashiv. His name was Akim. And he lived in a nearby village on the other side of Liozne from where Reb Baruch was. On that side of Liozne, there was a spring with a stream that the animals used to drink from. In Lozny itself, seemingly there was no rivers, no ponds, nothing. There was a stream on the other side, and all the animals the shepherds used to take the animals there to drink. This sorcerer, Akim, in those days they had some power seemingly, he cursed that stream. And the people said that the water of the stream turned blackish after that. And animals that drank from that stream became sick, and some of them died. The shepherds who washed in that stream, because they had like places which was deeper, became full of like leprosy, rashes, and got sick. It was a terrible thing, and there was nowhere else to drink. The only way is if you have your own well that you pump water out from. So the people were suffering, the shepherds were suffering, and the animals were suffering. Even Reb Baruch, who also had livestock and sheep, some of them died and got sick. One day, the Alter Rebbe, a young boy, is sitting in the orchard of his father, and his younger brother, Rabbi Yehuda Leib, is sitting next to him. And in this orchard, in this garden of the Alter Rebbe, of Reb Baruch, there were many fruit trees. Problem was that a lot of them were planted within 4 years ago, and there's a mitzvah in the Torah, Orlo, you're not allowed to eat fruits for the first 4 years, even outside of Eretz Yisrael. It's forbidden to eat fruits from a new tree, a fruit tree. Now, when we buy fruits in the store, the Chacham said, you don't know, it's from a Goyish place, and therefore you're allowed to eat it. You don't have to go and ask when it's from. But if a Jew plants a fruit tree, you have to let it grow fruits for 4 years. After that, you're allowed to eat it. And that was the story in this garden of the Baruch, that there were fresh trees that were within the 4 years. And they wouldn't eat it. One of the maids, one of the cleaning ladies in Reb Baruch's villa, was not Jewish. She took an apple off from one of the trees. She ate part of it, and the other part she gave to the Maharil, the Alter Rebbe's younger brother, Rabbi Yehuda Leib. He made a bracha bar priya eitz, and he ate it. Then he ran over to his older brother, who he knew was very great, and he asked his older brother, what's the bracha achreina, what's the after bracha for an apple? So his brother, the Alter Rebbe, said, where did you get the apple from? So he said that the lady, the cleaning lady, the maid, gave it to me. She took it from one of the trees. The Alter Rebbe became very, very sad for what he told me. He was a very serious Yireh Shamayim. And he told his younger brother, it's forbidden to eat this type of fruits. And the Alter Rebbe set up for his younger brother a tikkun, how to fix this avera. Whatever he told him, it doesn't say. But he also told him, you have to take upon yourself a new decision, a new achlote. That from now on, all your life, you will never eat a food or drink a drink until you first go and find out if it's kosher. And he accepted it. When the Rabbi Yehuda Leib accepted to do everything that his older brother told him, the Alter Rebbe told him, now we have to go to the mikveh to toivel ourselves. And the Alter Rebbe explained to him that there's 2 types of immersion in a mikveh. One is an immersion, dipping in the water from tumah to tahara, from impure to pure. But there's another immersion in a mikveh, or in pure waters, like a mayon, in a spring, which is from choil to kedusha, from mundane to holiness, which is a higher level. It means even if you're toher, but you're going to a higher level in your neshama and so on. So he feels, says the Alter Rebbe to his brother, Rabbi Yehuda Leib.
Do I have one big mikvah or separate ones?
No, one second. Let's lay the end of the story. Very good question. So the Alter Rebbe told his brother, I feel that this mountain here, there was like a rocky mountain there, with big rocks, he said, I feel like this mountain, over here, under this mountain, there's fresh spring water. And next to this mountain, to the rocks, there's an indent in the ground, so it'll fill up the water, and we'll be able to use it as a mikveh, said the Alter Rebbe. All we have to do is dig. And seemingly this spring water was close to the ground. So the 2 boys dug, and suddenly a lot of water started coming out from this well. The rock itself, the color of it, was close to white. And therefore, everyone named it the White Spring. And it filled up the place over there, so they were able to go to the mikveh. And from there, seemingly people they dug like a stream, like whatever it was, and it became a stream next to Lyozna, I don't know if it was a big one or not. And all the animals that were sick, that came and drank from that, became healthy. And the shepherds who got rashes on their skin and got sick, all were healed by washing in this.
What happened to the old white spring?
This is it. What do you mean?
The one that had the curse on it.
I don't know.
That wasn't also
drink
called
from it.
the white spring? That was
No, that one was just a spring, just a river, a stream. So the Alter Rebbe, when he turned 13, the Chabad Chassidus, which was a serious organization, Chabad Chassidus, the burial society in Liozne, they accepted Alter Rebbe as a full member, because that's what they made up in the 5 years old, that he's going to become a full member. But not only that, all the learned people in Liozne gave such praises to the Alter Rebbe, they called him Rav Tane Upolig. It's based on a Gemara. In the Gemara times, the Mishnah was written by the Tanoim, the earlier sages. The Gemara, however, was a new era, a new generation of sages, which were called Amoraim. And they were the ones who taught the Gemara and explained the Mishnah. Now, since they were the next generation, so Moira from the Gemara times can't argue on the previous generation because they were greater people. So they can't argue against them. So when a Tana said something in the Mishnah, the earlier sages, Tana is from the Mishnah. If he says it clearly, you can't argue. Many times it wasn't so clear, and the Amoraim had to clarify it. So they can clarify it, but they can't argue in that straightforward halacha. However, the first Amoira of the next generation was a person called Rav. That was not his real name. I forgot his real name. Abba Richter or something? Abba? Something like that. I don't remember his real name. But he called him Rav. And the Chachamim decided that Rav, even though he's an Amoira, but he's also like a Tana. And he's allowed to argue against the previous generation. That's what they called the Alter Rebbe. Can you imagine? They called the Alter Rebbe that he's, and his name stayed Rav for all the years, basically. All the time. Yeah, Shulchan Aruch HaRav, they call it, right? The Shulchan Aruch of the Rav. So that's what they named him. Let's go to the Alter Rebbe's Bar Mitzvah. But the Alter Rebbe's Bar Mitzvah, there were a lot of geniuses there, Talmidei Chachamim, and they all asked him questions, and he answered them, and it was something very, very special with Bar Mitzvah. A short while after his Bar Mitzvah, he went to learn in Vitebsk by his uncle. That was Dvorah Leah, another Dvorah Leah, not the Alter Rebbe's daughter. His daughter was named after her. But this Dvorah Leah was the Alter Rebbe's aunt, her Baruch's sister. She got married to this Rabbi Yosef Yitzchok. And he was in Vitebsk, he had a yeshiva there, and Alter Rebbe went to learn by him, and he said that every day by Rabbi Yosef Yitzchok, his uncle, was like a Yom Tov. In other words, he enjoyed so much the learning by him. And this Rabbi Yosef Yitzchok was a follower of the Baal Shem Tov, but he couldn't tell him anything. So he used to tell him psukim, he used to translate psukim to the Alter Rebbe with beautiful explanations of Divrei Torah, and the Alter Rebbe loved it, and it was part of Chassidus, it was part of the Baal Shem Tov. But Rabbi Yosef couldn't tell him that this is the Baal Shem Tov's teachings. Only later on did the Alter Rebbe find out that these were the Alter Rebbe's teachings. Everyone that came in contact with the Alter Rebbe was warned by the Baal Shem Tov not to reveal to him, and not even to tell him about Chassidus. He has to come to Chassidus on his own. And next time, Mitchell, we'll talk about how the Alter Rebbe went to Mezrich, to Mezrich Magid, and Hashem Zol. But you told me to make double, so I made double. Next week we're off, and the week after that also, Mitzvah Hashem. It's Hashem's help. Thank you very much, everyone.
אתה חושב שנשמה חדשה עושה את הבן אדם חכם, או שצריך גם נשמה חדשה וגם חוכמה?